Hi, folks. We're looking at chapter 5 today. It's entitled He Can Deal Gently. And again, this is a very short chapter, but it's a very powerful chapter if you think about what the author is trying to bring out for us to think about. It's actually an expansion upon chapter 4. If you remember chapter 4, we looked at the whole issue of him being able to sympathize with us. And with sympathize, he's reflecting on its meaning of co-suffering with us. So Jesus enters into our suffering and into our sin with us. And so he wants to expand upon that idea, because when you go back to chapter 4 of Hebrews, it's the whole issue of Jesus being our high priest, who's able to sympathize with us in our weakness because he was tested as we are, yet without sin. So now we come to chapter 5 of Hebrews in the author's thinking, and he wants to expand upon that whole issue of how does he deal with us. Now, I think that's a very important question for you and I to consider, especially when we think about the reality of Jesus and his approach to us. And yes, it is comforting to know that he enters into our suffering with us. But somehow we kind of delineate in our mind that while he may sympathize with us, he may treat us differently, though. He may be harsh with us. He may be exasperated. He may be fed up with the fact that we're still dealing with this. And so I think the author is trying to make the point that that's not true of Christ. In fact, when we look at Christ, we see a heart that has compassion for us. So his focus in chapter 5 is going to be Hebrews chapter 5. So let me read it to you from the version I normally use, which is the New King James. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 2, the writer of Hebrews writes, "He can have compassion on those who are ignorant and going astray, since he himself is also subject to weakness." Now, when he reflects upon this verse, though, he's using the English Standard Version in his book. And so let me read you what the English Standard Version says concerning what the writer of Hebrews is writing here. The English Standard Version says this: "He can deal gently with the ignorant and wayward, since he himself is beset with weakness." So, whereas the New King James says he can deal with us compassionately, here he's talking about, or that he shows compassion to us. He's reflecting, taking that word and reflecting a little bit differently, which is very much the same meaning, that he deals with us gently, okay? Gently. So the question is, why would he do that? What is going on here? Is this the manner in which he presents himself to us when we reach out to him and he reaches out to us in our suffering? And I think it's reflected in the book when you look on page 53. 53, the author says this: "The idea here in Hebrews 5, verse 2 is that Jesus does not throw up his hands in the air when he engages sinners. He is calm, tender, soothing, restrained. He deals gently with us." Okay, so I want you to stop for a moment. I want you to think about your life. I'm going to think about my life. Think about the reality that you and I continually find ourselves sinning, typically the same sins. Now, we may come to a point where we say, well, I'm not involved in big sins. No, I'm not worried about big sins, okay? We tend to categorize things like that. God doesn't. You and I struggle with the same kind of sins, maybe the same attitudes, maybe the same weaknesses in some area, things that we internalize. Nobody may know what our sins are, but we do. Or we're going to him continually with the same issue, that is, we're struggling with this same difficulty that we're suffering under. All right, so we go to him with those issues, but in the back of our mind, we've got a question. Like, really, does he want to hear me talk about this again? Does he really want me to bring this up again? It seems like I'm always going to this issue every time I pray. And I think it's interesting that the author is pointing out here from Hebrews chapter 5, verse 2, he makes the point that Jesus doesn't throw up his hands like, oh my goodness, are you kidding me? Here he is again, or here she is again. Jesus doesn't do that. How does he act towards us? Well, he acts to us calmly, so it's not by emotion. He's tender towards us. He's restrained. And he deals gently with us. I think that's a powerful truth for you and I to really grasp a hold of in our lives. Because we can be so defeated and have such a wrong idea about how Jesus deals with us. And here it is, it's trying to explain to us that, wait a minute now, he reaches out with his heart and he's gentle with us. He's gentle with us. Now, having said that, let's talk a little bit about who does he deal with this like, okay? Because, I mean, is he like this with everybody? No, not necessarily. But it's important for you and I to understand who he's like this with. So if you go over on 54, there's a couple sections I want to read here that reflect on who he's this way with, who he acts this way towards, okay? So what the writer of Hebrews has in mind with ignorant, referring to accidental sins, and wayward, referring to deliberate sins. So here's what he's saying. He's saying here that he deals gently with those who are ignorant and those who are wayward. And reflecting on the Old Testament concept of both the ignorant and the wayward, he's talking about those who sin accidentally and then those who sin deliberately. So he's talking about both groups, because you and I sin accidentally, but we also sin deliberately. I think we all acknowledge that. So he is talking about that Jesus is dealing this way gently with both groups of people. Both groups of people. So here's the point. The point that Jesus deals gently and only gently with all sinners who come to him, irrespective of their particular offense and just how heinous it is. But whether the sinner comes to him, whatever our offense, he deals gently with us. If we never come to him, we will experience judgment so fierce, it will be like a double-edged sword coming out of his mouth at us. What's he saying here? He's saying the people that Jesus deals gently with in their sins are those who come to him. They're the ones who come to him and say, Lord, I'm a sinner. This is what I've done. It doesn't matter what they've done. Okay, so Jesus doesn't have a grading scale. Oh, well, you're in this category of sin here. No, it's all the same to him. The issue is are you going to come to him? And the reality is, those who don't, then they're going to face a stiff judgment. So let's make a delineation here between those who come to him, those who don't. Okay? Those who come to him, those who don't. Now, what's the meaning of this for us? And I think this is the point that he kind of brings out here in the bottom paragraph of page 54. So let me read this to you. Consider what this all means. When we sin, we are encouraged to bring our mess to Jesus because he will know just how to receive us. I thought that really stuck out to me. Bring our mess, because isn't that true? Whether we're going through some sort of suffering or whether, especially if we're dealing with a sin issue in our life, it's our mess. We bring our mess to him, okay? And he knows exactly how to receive us. He doesn't handle us roughly. He doesn't scold and scowl. He doesn't lash out the way many of our parents have. With all restraint on his part, with all this restraint on his part is not because he has a diluted view of our sinfulness. Jesus doesn't have a diluted view of our sinfulness, folks. Don't get that kind of perspective here. He knows our sinfulness far more deeply than we do. Of course he does. It put him on the cross. Indeed, we are aware of just the tip of the iceberg of our depravity, even in our most searching moments of self-knowledge. His restraint simply flows from his tender heart for his people. This is where Jesus' heart is. He cares for us. And so when we come to him with our suffering and with our sin, we got to get rid of the concept that he's some big heavy waiting to squash us, but also begin to see now, rather, he loves me. And he understands far better than I do what I'm going through. And he'll help me. He'll help me. So why does he do this? Okay? Why does Jesus deal gently with us? Okay? And so that's really what the author kind of focuses on in the last section of our chapter. Why does he deal with that? Deal with us in such a way? Well, because Hebrews 5:2 says this. He himself was beset with weakness. What does that mean, George? He's God. He's omnipotent. What do you mean he was beset with weakness? Yes, but Jesus was fully God, but yet fully human. Fully human. So when he dwelt among us in a human body, he was beset with the same weaknesses as you and I were. So he understands. He understands exactly what we are going through. So that brings us to really the last thing the author points out here that I just want to share with you now. He said, contrary to what we expect to be the case, therefore, the deeper into weakness and suffering and testing we go, the deeper Christ's solidarity with us. That's got to be an encouragement. Because you and I do face times that we go deeper into our suffering, we go deeper into our testing or the temptation, we go deeper into our weakness. And the reality is that the deeper we go into it, the more solidarity Jesus has with us. So here it is. As we go down into pain and anguish, we are descending ever deeper into Christ's very heart. Listen to this. Not away from it. All right, think about that. So the deeper we go into it, the deeper we go into our suffering, the deeper we go into our sin and the struggle with our sin, he's not running away from us. He goes there with us. That is how awesome Jesus is towards you and I. That's his heart. And I hope you reflect upon the truths of chapter 5 this week.